The camp was organized around labor. Prisoners sewed uniforms, assembled munitions, sorted materials for Siemens and other German firms. Those who could not work were classified as expendable. Illness, injury, or pregnancy could result in transfer to the infirmary, a place from which many did not return. Ravensbrück operated under a logic that was both bureaucratic and arbitrary. Prisoners were assigned numbers, categories, triangles of colored cloth denoting their classification. Roll calls were held twice daily. Rations were calculated to the gram. Punishments were recorded in ledgers. And yet beneath this veneer of order was profound chaos. Guards acted on whim. Selections for execution or medical experimentation followed no predictable pattern. Survival often depended less on compliance than on invisibility. Martha Weiss learned this within her first month. Ravensbrück, Germany, May 2nd, 1945. Morning. The light that morning was soft, almost gentle. It filtered through the pine trees beyond the perimeter fence and fell in pale stripes across the dirt road leading to the main gate. The gate stood open. Inside the compound, nothing moved. The barracks, long wooden structures painted gray, were silent. No smoke rose from the kitchens, no dogs barked. The guard towers, visible against the spring sky, were empty. A woman sat on the ground near Barrack 32, her back against the wall. She was small, not naturally small, but diminished. Her hair had been shaved months ago and was growing back in uneven patches. Her prison uniform hung loose. She wore no shoes. Her hands rested in her lap, palms up, fingers slightly curled. She was not asleep. Her eyes were open, but she did not appear to be looking at anything in particular. A few meters away, another woman lay on her side in the dirt, breathing shallowly. Farther down, near the latrine block, 3 bodies had been covered with blankets. The woman against the wall did not look at them. She had learned not to look. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps a kilometer away, came the sound of trucks, engines grinding low, voices shouting in Russian. The woman did not turn her head. She sat very still, hands open, staring at nothing as the liberators approached. Who she was. Her name, before the war, was Martha Weiss. She had been born in 1916 in Vienna. Her father was a tailor, her mother taught piano. Martha was the middle of 3 daughters. She studied languages at the university, French, Italian, some English. She wanted to be a translator. She imagined traveling, working in embassies, reading novels in their original form. In March 1938, when Germany annexed Austria, Martha was 22 years old. By 1939, her father's shop had been confiscated. Her older sister had emigrated to Switzerland. Her younger sister was engaged to a man who promised to take them both to Palestine as soon as the paperwork cleared. Martha stayed in Vienna. She took a position as a clerk in a municipal office. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself the worst had already happened. In November 1941, she was arrested. The charge, such as it was, involved forged transit papers, documents she had typed for a Jewish family trying to leave the city. She had not hidden what she was doing, not well enough. A colleague had reported her, or perhaps it was someone else. The records are unclear. She was held for 6 weeks in a local prison, then transferred to Munich, then, in February 1942, to Ravensbrück, prisoner number 10,427. She was 25 years old. Ravensbrück concentration camp, located approximately 80 kilometers north of Berlin, began operations in May 1939. It was the largest camp designed primarily for women. By 1945, more than 130,000 women had passed through its gates. Prisoners came from across occupied Europe: political dissidents, resistance members, Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma women, Jewish women, Soviet prisoners of war, women accused of criminal offenses or moral infractions, women arrested for no clear reason at all. At night, lying on her bunk, she would press her hand against her chest and feel the small square of paper beneath the fabric. It was her proof that she had existed outside this place, proof that there had been light, laughter, a world where people stood in front of fountains and smiled. In the spring of 1944, during a particularly brutal selection, a guard ordered her to strip. Routine inspection for lice or contraband, or simply because he could. She removed her uniform, piece by piece, and the photograph fell to the ground. The guard picked it up, looked at it, then tore it in half and dropped it in the dirt. He did not beat her. He did not take her name. He simply walked away. Marta stood naked in the cold, staring at the 2 pieces of paper at her feet. She did not pick them up. She did not cry. She dressed, returned to her barracks, and lay on her bunk in silence. After that, she stopped trying to remember. The strategy. It began as an accident of exhaustion. In the autumn of 1944, Marta was called to the camp's administrative office, a rare occurrence, generally a dangerous one. A clerk sat behind a desk. He was middle-aged, balding, his uniform slightly rumpled. He gestured for her to stand in front of him and opened a file. Prisoner 10,427, Marta Weiss, is that correct? She stared at him. Her mind was blank, not from fear, but from a kind of numbing fatigue. She had slept perhaps 2 hours the previous night. A woman in the bunk below hers had wept until dawn. "I don't know," she said. The clerk looked up, irritated. "What do you mean you don't know?" I'm not sure. I don't remember." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, closed the file, and waved her away. "Get out." She left, trembling. But later, lying on her bunk, she thought about what had happened. He had not pressed her. He had not punished her. He simply dismissed her. And so she began, deliberately, to forget. When guards asked her questions, "Where are you from? What did you do before the war? Do you have family?" she let her eyes drift. She stammered. She apologized softly in German. "I'm sorry, I don't remember." It made her useless to them. Interrogation required a coherent subject. Punishment required someone capable of understanding cause and effect. But a woman with no past, no identity, no story, she was simply a body, a number, forgettable. She became invisible. Winter 1944 to 1945. The winter of 1944 was the coldest in decades. Inside the barracks, ice formed on the walls. Women slept pressed together for warmth. In the mornings, they woke to find that some among them had not woken at all. Marta stopped counting the dead. She stopped counting days. Time became something elastic, unreliable. A week could feel like a month. A day could vanish in an instant. In January, the Polish woman who had stood beside her at roll call collapsed during inspection. Typhus, or pneumonia, or simply starvation. The guards dragged her to the infirmary. Marta never saw her again. In February, bread rations were cut in half. In March, the sound of artillery, distant but unmistakable, began to echo from the east. The guards grew nervous. Roll calls became shorter. Selections became more frequent. And then, in late April, something shifted. The guards began to leave. Not all at once, but each day there were fewer of them. The dogs disappeared. The kitchens stopped operating. The workshops closed. On April 28th, there was no roll call. On April 29th, the remaining guards opened the gates and fled. Liberation. May 1st, 1945. Soviet soldiers entered Ravensbrück in the early afternoon. They came on foot and in trucks, wearing heavy coats, rifles slung across their shoulders. They moved slowly through the compound, their faces tight, unreadable. The women who were still alive emerged from the barracks. Some walked, some crawled, some simply sat where they were, too weak or too disoriented to move. Marta stood near Barrack 32, watching. A Soviet officer approached her. He was young, perhaps 30, with a scar across his left cheek. He said something in Russian. She did not understand. He tried again in broken German. "Your name?" She looked at him. His face was kind, or perhaps simply tired. She opened her mouth. For a moment, the truth was there. Marta Weiss, from Vienna, 28 years old, prisoner number 10,427. But the words did not come. She had spent 3 years forgetting. She had survived by becoming no one. And now, standing in front of this soldier, she did not know how to become someone again. "I don't remember," she said. The soldier stared at her. Then he nodded slowly and moved on. The Soviet army documented what they found at Ravensbrück with methodical precision. Reports filed in early May 1945 describe approximately 3,500 prisoners still alive in the camp at the time of liberation. Most were severely malnourished. Many were ill with typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery. Some were beyond medical help. In the weeks following liberation, displaced persons camps were established. Survivors were registered, photographed, interviewed. Relief workers from the Red Cross and other organizations attempted to compile lists of names, nationalities, families seeking relatives. Among the records from this period is a notation dated May 7, 1945. Female prisoner, approximately 28 to 30 years, German-speaking, unable to provide name or place of origin. Transferred to DP Facility Parchim for medical evaluation. There is no photograph attached, no prisoner number recorded, no follow-up documentation. The woman described in this report may or may not have been Marta Weiss. Aftermath. Recovery is not a single event. It is not liberation or medical treatment or the signing of a peace treaty. Recovery is waking every morning and remembering where you are. It is eating food and keeping it down. It is speaking a sentence that makes sense. It is looking at your reflection and recognizing the face. For many survivors of Ravensbrück, these tasks proved impossible. Displaced persons camps across Germany filled with women who could not or would not return home. Home no longer existed. Families had been murdered, cities had been destroyed, borders had shifted. And many survivors found that even among their own people, they were met with silence or suspicion or a profound unwillingness to hear what they had endured. Stigma followed them. In some communities, women who had been imprisoned were viewed as complicit, contaminated, morally compromised. Questions were asked. Why were you arrested? What did you do to survive? Did you collaborate? Some women changed their names. Some emigrated to Palestine, Australia, the Americas. Some returned to their hometowns and never spoke of the war again. And some simply disappeared. The silence. In 1947, a social worker in Munich interviewed a woman living in a Catholic charity home for displaced persons. The woman was estimated to be in her early 30s. She spoke German fluently, though with an accent that suggested Vienna or perhaps Prague. She had no identity papers, no family contacts, no stated intention to emigrate or return anywhere. When asked her name, she said she did not know. The social worker noted in her report, "Patient exhibits symptoms consistent with severe dissociative amnesia. She responds to questions but provides no personal history. She appears calm, cooperative, but profoundly detached. Recommends psychiatric evaluation." There is no record of whether such an evaluation took place. The woman remained in the charity home for another 18 months. Then, in the spring of 1949, she left. No forwarding address, no explanation. She was never seen again. The International Tracing Service, established after the war to locate missing persons and reunite families, holds millions of records related to Nazi persecution.
Among these records are thousands of names listed as missing or unconfirmed. People who entered the concentration camp system and were never conclusively accounted for. People whose fates remain officially unknown. Marta Weiss appears on such a list. Her arrest is documented. Her transfer to Ravensbrück is documented. Her prisoner number, 10,427, is recorded in the camp registry for 1942. But there is no death certificate, no liberation record, no post-war repatriation file. She exists in the archive as a question mark. It is possible she died at Ravensbrück before liberation and her death was never recorded in the chaos of the camp's final months. It is possible she survived, but left no trace by choice or circumstance. It is possible she lived for many years after the war, under a different name, in a different country, and died quietly, anonymously, having never reclaimed the identity she lost. We cannot know.
There is a tendency, when we speak of the Holocaust, to focus on numbers. 6 million Jews, 11 million total, 100,000 at Ravensbrück. The numbers are necessary. They establish scale. They resist denial. But numbers do not convey what it meant to be a single person inside that machinery, to wake every morning uncertain whether you would survive the day, to watch others die and know that you might be next, to make bargains with yourself, moral, physical, spiritual, in order to continue breathing. Survival did not guarantee dignity. Liberation did not guarantee healing. And memory, for many, became unbearable. Some survivors forgot in order to live. Others lived in order to remember. And some, like Marta Weiss, if she survived, may have found that the distance between those two things was impossibly vast. Ravensbrück, Germany, present day. The camp is now a memorial site. The barracks have been reconstructed. The perimeter walls remain. Visitors walk through the grounds in silence, guided by plaques and photographs and recorded testimonies. In the museum, there is a wall covered with names, thousands of them, women who passed through this place, women who died here, women whose fates are unknown. Among them, in small letters, Weiss, Marta, B. 1916, Vienna, prisoner 10,427, status unknown. No photograph, no story, just a name and a question that will never be answered. Perhaps she survived. Perhaps she did not. Perhaps, in the end, survival and selfhood are not the same thing. Perhaps forgetting was the only way she could continue. And perhaps somewhere, in a city we cannot name, in a life we cannot trace, a woman once sat by a window and watched the light change, and felt nothing, and remembered nothing, and lived.